Welcome to this latest Leading with Purpose podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we'll be hearing from Lucy Gill-Simmen. She's Vice Dean for Education and Student Experience at Royal Holloway Business School. Royal Holloway are part of the Purpose Coalition and just a fantastic example of a university that is really driving social mobility. Lucy, it's brilliant to have you here. I am really looking forward to this discussion because we're going to touch on what Royal Holloway does, some of your work at the business school and how that's changing business degrees. We're going to talk a bit, hopefully, about AI and some of your thinking on that as well, which is really fascinating. First of all, thanks for being part of the podcast today. And Lucy, tell us a little bit about your journey. How do you end up, because I think you're a marketeer by training. Tell us how you end up going into this role and being vice dean at the business school.
Okay, thanks very much, Justine, and thank you for having me. So when anyone asks me about how I came to be where I am today, I think I always sort of reflect on this, and it could take us 2 hours to discuss, but we don't have 2 hours, so I'll just give you the short version. I came into education later in life and very much by accident, having worked in the corporate world as a marketeer for quite some time. And then I ended up going, having my family and studying for a master's and then studying for a PhD, and then very much falling into education, as I say, as sort of a second or even third career. But I think something that when I look back on this, I think it's something that I've always been really interested in. And I think this is something that drives me now every day is I've always considered who is it who gets to succeed. So I've always been fascinated about not just who succeeds and why, but very much about who gets to succeed. And I've never thought that this has been sort of a very level playing field when it comes to who gets to succeed. So I think that sort of really is what drives me when people ask me that question, why are you in education? And it's very simple. Who gets to succeed and why? And then what is my role within that space? And how can we ensure that everybody has the equal chance to succeed? So I think that's sort of what drives me at the moment, and that what drives me in education.
Well, it drives me as well. I just think it's such a fundamental foundation stone of how any society should work. But, obviously, definitely our own. And I think in a way it brings us on to Royal Holloway, because this is a university that literally is a university of social purpose. It's got an amazing heritage, hasn't it? Which is probably worth touching on as well. So let's start there and then talk about what it means for young people and mature students from less advantaged backgrounds today.
No, absolutely. And as you've mentioned, Justine, we are a university of social purpose. And when people ask me, what that means, I translate that as, doing the right thing and doing the right thing for everyone, for all. And I feel that at Royal Holloway, when it comes to talking about access, it's not just about opening the doors. So you could say that, all universities give young people or people from marginalized backgrounds those opportunities by providing access. Access is opening the door. But I feel at Royal Holloway, we go so much further than that, in that we facilitate that journey for students. We facilitate that learning, that experience, the networking, and the provision of voice. So our students don't just come and leave, but they go through an educational experience when they're with us, and they have access to networks, and they have the right to a voice, which they otherwise might not have had. So I feel through that social purpose, it's really about thinking about what is the best way in which we can facilitate an educational experience for all, regardless of background. And a large number, I work with thousands of students every day in my role, many of whom are first in family to go to university. And what I notice, and they come into my office often, this is something that never ceases to amaze me, is that talent is everywhere. But it's the opportunity and the confidence and the hope that are lacking. And as a university of social purpose, I see us as here to help with that opportunity, to provide that confidence and to provide hope in places that it wasn't there before, simply wasn't there.
I think that's such an inspiring message, because I've often felt that if people have a sense they can actually get somewhere, then they will aim for it.
Hmm.
It's almost like a just add water strategy.
Hmm.
But what you're doing at Royal Holloway, I thought the other point you made actually is worth touching on, is because I think policymakers often miss this, is there's one thing having a door that's open.
Hmm.
There's another thing knowing that, particularly for people who are the least likely to walk through it, there's the strategy around, well, how are they actually going to get through that door?
Hmm.
Because otherwise, the risk is you will have some positive impact by improving capacity for most people, but actually, not everyone will get to use that. And as you say, talent really genuinely is spread everywhere. And I think for those of us who've been in education, certainly I've had my own social mobility journey, Lucy. So I feel like I'm probably as qualified as anyone to sort of say, in all these different echelons of work and society that I've touched upon,
Hmm.
I genuinely think talent really is spread evenly. That's been my
Hmm.
very direct experience.
Mm.
So I think what you need is those doors opened, but also all of that work that Royal Holloway does to genuinely build that wider social capital that people need, that sense of optimism and hope, that sense of direction, to be able to use that talent to develop and then use it. And as you say, then connect up
Hmm.
to those opportunities. And I think, I don't know what your experience is, but do you feel like for students today, there is that sense of optimism? What are some of the things, for example, at Royal Holloway, that you feel really help people to build up that confidence that they can have a future?
So I think there are issues around belonging and students coming into the university space and wondering if and how they belong. And um, they need to, my view is that, and we've done quite a few initiatives around this, particularly in the business school, is getting students to understand their identity, who they are, and their narrative. And often through that narrative piece, they think, oh, you know what, maybe I do belong here. Maybe I can make a difference in the world. Maybe I can make the changes that I'd like to see in the world. And we do that for instance, we have a really interesting initiative, which is called Career Tales. When students come along and they work in the workshops in the business school, and they're not doing LinkedIn profiles and writing CVs. They're standing up and telling their stories. Many of them come and say, well, Lucy, I don't really have a story to tell. And then I'll sit down with them and I'll say, sort of start asking them some questions. And I'm like, you know what, that's your story. That is who you are. This is who you are. This is what you stand for. This is what you're passionate about. And then we start through that sort of narrative piece and this identity piece. They start to get a sense of who they are. And it's not just about building skills. Of course, we need the CVs, the LinkedIn, the skill sets, but it's thinking about getting that sense of who they are and how they can belong within a professional space. So they can start to think, you know what, when I leave here, I can be who I hope to be one day.
Mm.
So lots of different initiatives. That's just an example of how we use storytelling to
And I think it's, sorry, go on.
yeah, for how students, learn to talk about who they are and be proud of who they are and have that hope.
And it's quite interesting because often, obviously you have students of all ages.
Hmm.
But I think it's also fair to say that, for many of them, there'll be perhaps younger people, and it might be the first time that they've really almost stepped back and looked at themselves
Mm.
a bit from the outside to sort of think, oh, actually, who am I? I'm not a child anymore. I'm now a young adult,
Hmm.
and I'm going to have a future. I'm going to have an impact, a footprint. There'll be something to do with me that happens. What do I want that to be? And I think it's stepping back and in a sense, helping them understand that they get to decide,
Hmm.
and they're not just blown around by events.
Hmm.
Actually, they really have some agency as a person. And that's what Royal Holloway, I think, is giving them, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. What I try to sort of zoom in on, and I even do this at the open days when, they come and see us when they're 17 years old, some of them, and say, well, what are you passionate about? What are some of the causes? What are some of the things that you see in the world that you're really interested in? And this generation, they're all really passionate about something, around causes, around things that are happening around us. And the world is a frightening place right now, a very frightening place, but they all have something that they're interested in, whether it's,
Mm.
Artemis, the latest astronaut visits to the moon. There's something that they want to hang their hat on. And that's what we need to tease out.
Something positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Something that they can think something about positively, or even if it's something, you know, that they feel passionate about that's not so positive, we instill in them the idea that they can make a change, so that they can become a change maker, that they can make a sense maker, they can make sense of things and then make the changes. So that we do a lot of work around.
And I think it all makes sense because fundamentally, one of the issues I think we've faced in Britain is that over time it's felt like effort and reward. If I do something here, something that I want to happen, then takes place over there. Just feels like that's got degraded. And I think what it's doing is putting people much more back in control of their lives and a sense of the fact that actually what they do will have an impact, not necessarily just even for them, but maybe for lots more people in the future.
Mhm.
And I think some of that innovation and that work that I think has become ever more important for all universities to do. But I wanted to come on to talk about some of the innovation of Royal Holloway on accelerated degrees. And
Mhm.
that's a big thing that you've been leading at the business school, Lucy. So tell us a little bit about that business and management accelerated degree, how you're bringing it in, what it will mean for some of the students, and maybe obviously for many people who'll be listening and watching this podcast and thinking, oh, I don't know what that is.
Mhm.
Let's start by
Mhm.
explaining how it's
Mhm.
different, what's new
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I'm very delighted to be launching the new BSc Business and Management. It's an accelerated degree. Now, I always say, so this is an BSc which our students can complete in 2 years rather than 3 years. So the normal university degree, a bachelor's degree would be 3 years, and this 2 years. And I do not frame this as a faster degree. I frame it as a different philosophy of higher
Hmm.
education. It's about doing things. So it's not necessarily about doing things faster, although it is faster. It's very much, a lot of work has gone into the design, and the design is about doing it differently. So how can and we've created this completely from scratch. This isn't something that we've pieced together from existing modules. This is something that we've designed completely in a new way. And we've designed it in such a way that for any student, 3 years is a long time. It's not just time though, it's cost, it's risk, and it can be lost earnings. So what we've done is condensed full bachelor's degree. It's the same credits as a 3-year degree into 2 years, so that learners can come and learn with us and be ready in 2 years' time to go into the world of work, to start earning, to start potentially lifting themselves, lifting their families out of poverty
Hmm.
more quickly. But what we've done through the design of the degree, and this is absolutely key, is we don't wait for them to feel ready to go into the world of work. They actually are in the world of work while they're learning. So the world of work underpins all that they do. It's an experiential degree. It's working with real companies. It's also a place-based degree, so it's taught
Hmm.
out of our London campus, which is in
Hmm.
Bloomsbury. And there we're using London itself as a classroom. Our students will be working in businesses, with industries, engaging with real challenges. And as I say, it's about doing things differently. It's a different philosophy. So it's for very motivated learners who really want to learn quickly, intensively, but in a real world. So not from a textbook. Of course, we teach the theory. They do need to understand the theory of business and management, but it's about engaging with business and working with business and understanding what it means to do business and to be in business. So it's a very, very exciting time. I'm thrilled to be welcoming our first cohort this September, and really seeing how our students can engage in with a very different type of learning. So it's not something we've done within the business school before, and we're super excited to see our students learning in this way and giving students, a lot of students from more privileged backgrounds come with this hidden invisible access to networks and to
Hmm.
insight. But what we're doing here as a university, as a business school, is making that visible and structured for all our students. So it's not just for those who maybe have, parents who've been to university before, who have their own networks, who've introduced their children to those networks. Not all of our students have those opportunities. So we're making that visible, we're making it structured, and we're making it available and accessible to all our students. And we're welcoming students of all ages. So there'll also be that very interesting dynamic within the classroom of others learning about others as well together.
And how are you actually doing? As you said, it's all the same amount of credits. How do you fit it into the 2 years? It's
Yeah.
normally students will be used to a term, 3 terms a year. You're obviously shaking that up as well.
Yeah. So on our 3-year degree, our students study in term 1 and term 2, and then they come in term 3 just to do exams. What we're doing in the 2-year accelerated degree, students will come in term 1 and study, term 2 and study, and term 3 and study. So we're just condensing it and making the use of that third term. And it's surprising how much you can get into 52 weeks of the year, because they still do get their summer breaks, and their holiday breaks, etc. So it's about really making use, condensing things, having a more condensed timetable, such that students can learn intensively. But as I say, there's no cutting corners. It's not a lesser degree. It's just a very different philosophy of education.
And I think that probably makes sense for an awful lot of students anyway, because many students will have jobs anyhow. And, I think gone are the days when, like in my day where you'd leave college, then go to university, then you get a job. Actually, I think overwhelmingly students do work whilst they're going to university. So if they can manage to cope with that slightly more intense year, and
Hmm.
actually probably for many of them being able to get really on with their career after just 2 years, I guess, as you say, is a real advantage for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about being ready to go into the world of work more quickly. And we're very mindful that this is a more intense form of study. So we have a lot of scaffolding in place.
Hmm.
So we'll have a lot
Yep.
of check-in points with personal tutors, a lot of extra support in place, such that we can really scaffold our learners as they go through the process and make sure that and this is a phrase I use all the time, but that I like to think in education, nobody gets left behind. And this will be, again, very much what underpins this new degree, keeping an eye on where our learners are, picking them up if they need that picking up, scaffolding if they need that scaffolding, making sure that that's all in place so that our learners succeed, which is what, drives me in the first place.
And as you said, I think the other part of this clearly is the fact that you're in the capital city. There's a host of employers literally on the doorstep. It's worth just talking a little bit about that experience that you're giving them outside of the classroom, how you've managed to kind of pull those employers in. We're going to make sure that the Purpose Lab initiative that we do for
Hmm.
Purpose Coalition employers is
Hmm.
part of this as well. So let's just kind of dig into how they get that really applied
Hmm.
experience as part of the degree.
Yeah, so we've designed all of the modules around real world learning. We've recently hired a business development manager within the business school, and she's been very proactive in going out and talking to companies in London, building relationships, building partnerships with companies, and talking to them about the different opportunities that they can give to our students. So we developed a sort of a rubric, if you like, which companies can look at and say, I can bring in a live case study, or we'd like to bring our students onto our premises and show them a day in the life of a brand manager, for instance, or we have others who want to come in and give talks. We've got other industry players coming in to listen to our students pitch and to provide feedback on pitches. Others, as I say, bring live case studies. So actual case, this is an issue we're facing within our company at the moment. How would you work in teams to create a solution? Develop a podcast or develop a poster or something, kind of an assessment, an authentic type of an assessment where they can show that they're learning through this real work. So there are lots of different, it's been really an interesting process to develop this sort of book for industry players to choose from the number of different ways in which they can bring that real world experience. Previously, it's all been about, bringing a guest speaker, and they speak and they say, this is what we do, and then they leave. This is more engaging and working with the company. Other companies will come in and ask them to design a campaign or something for a new product that they're launching, or we might have an SME where they're looking at a growth strategy, and students will have to go away and come up with some ideas around that. So very, very hands-on, proactive learning, but also not just completing tasks, more actually engaging in activities where they have to show what they've learned, demonstrate their learning, and then get feedback on that learning so that they can then use that feedback going forwards in the next activity. So lots of different ways. And as you mentioned, also, I'm delighted to have the Purpose Lab, which I see sort of as a bridge between education and real world impact. So sort of going back a little bit to the fact that we're a university of social purpose, I don't want all of our students to think that doing business is working for Tesla or working for Google or working for these big companies. I want them to think about, what does it mean to work in a company for common good? Or what does it mean to have real world and social impact through conducting business? So I want them to think about organizations, but also challenges and missions, and to think about business that matters, and business for good. And that's where this purpose-driven learning environment that the Purpose Lab will enable us to achieve is very important, that's embedded into the degree.
I think it's fantastic. And I think you're right. When you talk to some of the best business leaders, I think they are very different to the ones that were maybe leading companies when I was starting in my career in finance. I have to say, Lucy, often marveling at the marketeers and thinking they had a much more interesting, interesting job. I love being a finance person too. But yeah, but I think leadership has changed.
Right.
And I think what employees want from an employer has changed. They want to feel they're part of something that genuinely has a sense of purpose, that's positive and matters to an outside world. They want to feel proud when they talk about where I work. And so leadership, I think, in business has become so much more multifaceted than just literally, have our numbers added up this month? Are we on target with our budget? Have we got a strategy that means that can happen over the next 3-year plan? It's almost become more like politics in the sense you have to be able to literally lead people. And I think understanding how business leaders think about that, but also how they make that real in a company, does matter increasingly. And I think that's something that for the future, if you want to get on in your career, you'll have to show you've got a sense of how you might be able to do that with the teams that you lead. And actually, I think Purpose Lab is a really great way of giving a sense of how businesses are starting to tackle this now. I think there's a long way to go and lots to learn on how to do it well. And I think for some of that experience that you're giving people, I think it's absolutely essential, because people think about business quite generically. They probably think, oh, what's the sector? Do I want to be in the sector? And yet, so many sectors are absolutely fascinating places to work in ways that you'd never think. They've always got roles that you would never expect. So many of them now have tech roles in them, and they're rising to the AI challenge, which we can talk about in a second. It's just a fascinating time in business. And I think equipping people really practically to have a sense of what those challenges look like is essential. And that's clearly what you're hoping to do with this degree by the sounds of it,
Mhm.
Lucy.
Yeah, I think this it's a really good point, and like you, so I love to watch Bloomberg TV and listen to CEOs from around the world, or CMOs or CFOs from around the world talking, and I listen very carefully to the challenges that they're facing, and
Mm.
you're absolutely right. As leaders, and the way they have to respond to these challenges has very much changed since I first went into business 30 years ago. And I think this brings us to a much bigger piece around you know the skills that they need,
Mhm.
that our students need. And I often say to them, what is the number one leadership skill that you think you need now? And none of them will say empathy, until you remind them of the extreme importance of empathy as a leadership skill. And then we get into talking about what it means to be empathic. And a lot of them are very interested in things like sustainable fashion, right? The circular
Mhm.
economy, sustainability, social impact, business transformation. They're interested in these things, but they don't sort of quite understand what the skills are required to work in those
Yeah.
spaces. So we name these humans, the human skills. We name empathy, we name resilience, we name emotional intelligence. We look at examples, good examples of where these skills lie within leaders and don't lie within other leaders. And we're constantly talking to our students, and we'll be showing them through this degree how to develop these kind of skills, because they'll be contributing, they'll be presenting, they'll be being challenged, they'll be receiving feedback. And it's all through these activities or actions that they can start to develop things like empathy, start to develop that resilience, understand the need for those skills as well. And this is even more important in the age of AI, the human skills.
It really is. And in fact, it's what sets humans apart in a sense. And I know that this steady wave of AI that's trickling through and will continue to more than trickle through, actually, it's just flowing through all of our lives, almost every aspect of it. We're just at the beginning of that. We're into it, but there's a long way to go. As a university, Lucy, how do you see this challenge around? I know it's something that you've thought really deeply about as an institution, and you've led a lot of that work.
Yeah, I mean, it's the narrative is changing daily. When AI first became, or when ChatGPT, LLMs first came to our attention, there was a lot of fear within the university spaces, a lot of across the entire sector, a lot of fear around what does this mean for education? What does this mean for educators? And what does it mean for students? But the narrative is shifting, and the narrative is shifting in extremely exciting ways around how can we, within Royal Holloway, for instance, the distinctiveness there is really around how do we teach the human machine collaborative piece? So how do we teach students the human side of things, deciding what it is what is the task that they need to do, and how
Mhm.
can they then use the AI or the machine to amplify, to facilitate, to improve, to make better, to enhance. How can you do that together? So it's very much about, I think it was really sort of hitting that nail on the head, was really understanding that we're here about collaboration. We're here about the human and the AI collaborative piece. And once we start thinking about it in those ways, we can start to see how a student who's struggling with an assignment and can't call their module leader at 2 o'clock in the morning, how we teach them, how can you use the AI to help you overcome that stress, to overcome that anxiety, to help you in an ethical and sustainable way to use the AI to help you achieve whatever task it is that you're trying to do. When to use it, when not to use it, why to use it, why not to use it. Being aware of the environmental impact, being aware of what it means to know something, because the machine doesn't know. The machine doesn't think. The machine can learn, but only the human can really know. And we need to teach our students first how to know, and then how they can use the AI on top of that. So it's very much at the moment about that collaborative piece, but it can do so much good for our students, but they need to also be very aware of the negative sides. But we're really moving now towards how can we work together, because it's not going away.
Exactly. And you and a colleague wrote a fantastic article on 1KG about this earlier in the year that is well worth a read. But I think the fundamental point it makes is that AI should be there to support human learning. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's this sense of it augmenting
Mm-hmm.
the journey that we're on in terms
Mm-hmm.
of education.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting in the article is really what you say is once that was almost flushed out as the defining point, actually suddenly a lot of the other things just fell into place.
Mm-hmm.
But, everything you've just talked about is how can it support people getting to where they need to get to in terms of their education and experience. And of course, there are some risks and downsides, but I think they're far easier to manage if you fundamentally understand what good looks like
Mm-hmm.
in the first place. And I think many businesses and business leaders who might be listening or watching this will relate to all of that. How do they sustainably and sensibly
Mm-hmm.
bring AI into their business operations, into perhaps their products that customers will want to use, make them easier and better for customers? What's it mean for supply chain?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for finding talent? But how can they help it support them rather than undermine? And I think those are some of the really big questions. And I guess to sort of wrap this up, back to the degree, that's part of, I'm sure, what will be in that 2-year accelerated course. And it sort of shows actually how, in a way, having a compressed timeline, I think probably means you can just generally make it a more nimble course responding to what's happening in the outside world, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, AI will be throughout the new degree. I always say, as a business school, if we're not teaching with AI, we're doing our students a disservice, because they'll be going into the workplace, and I do a lot of research with companies around how they're using it, so that I can better understand how I should be teaching it within the classroom. And I think, as you've mentioned, it's about amplifying. It's not about replacement. It's not about this, here's a piece of work. I got AI to do it. That's not how it works. But we have to teach our students that's not how it works. But what I think is a defining skill that we're going to need to really focus on a lot going forwards, and we will do this, and we are doing this within the new degree, but within our other degrees at Royal Holloway, is about judgment. So I think with AI, we've had to sort of grow our ability for judgment, and that requires being evaluative, looking at what the AI generates, deciding, is this what I wanted? But if I'm deciding if this is what I wanted, then I know what I want in the first place. And that comes from knowledge. So the students and us as educators, we have to first provide the knowledge, get our students to engage with that knowledge so that they understand those fundamentals. Once they've got those fundamentals, then they're in a better place to make those judgments. They know what they want to see. If you or I, Justine, we put something into ChatGPT, we get it back, we know whether it's what we wanted or not, because we know what good looks like. So I find this piece very exciting, because we're, as I say, teaching judgment, making decisions with incomplete information. We're teaching confidence, we're teaching identity, and we're teaching narrative. And I think all of those together are going to help our students dramatically engage and to thrive in an AI-driven world.
I think it's absolutely fascinating. And in a sense, what's wearing away my mind, Lucy, is it's judgment and it's curiosity and it's knowledge. And actually, it's that bundle together, isn't it? That I think really means that you're going to be able to thrive actually in this new world. Now, maybe we'll have a separate podcast on AI or something.
Yeah, I'd love that.
It sort of feels like we could definitely do one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But for today, Lucy Gill-Simmen, Vice Dean of Education and Student Experience at Royal Holloway Business School. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. I've absolutely loved it. It's a great discussion. And actually, the degree that you're putting on is what I probably would have wanted to do when I was looking at university. So it's finally there. Anyway, I hope it all goes well. I'm sure it will. And we're really looking forward to embedding the Purpose Lab experience as part of it as well. So brilliant to be working with you on all of that. So Lucy, thank you so much for doing the podcast today.
Great. Thanks so much, Justine. It's been such a great pleasure, and I'm delighted to have the Purpose Lab involved in this new degree. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.